Stop scrolling right now, because what you're about to hear is not just another headline, not just another inflation number flashing across your screen, but a slow-moving crisis that is quietly reshaping everyday life in England. And if you pay close attention, you'll realize it's not just about prices going up, it's about things disappearing entirely. 38%. That's the figure that should make you pause. Not growth, not opportunity, but the sharp edge of food inflation cutting into households compared to the pre-COVID era. And while most people are still adjusting to higher grocery bills, something far more serious is unfolding behind the scenes. Far away from supermarket aisles and kitchen tables, a narrow stretch of water called the Strait of Hormuz is becoming the center of a global chain reaction, a pressure point through which nearly 20% of the world's energy flows. And right now, that lifeline is under strain due to escalating tensions in Iran. You might think that's distant, that it doesn't concern your daily routine, but the truth is much more unsettling. Every delay, every disruption, every spike in energy costs there is now echoing directly into your shopping basket. This is how it begins, not with panic, not with empty shelves overnight, but with rising costs that quietly ripple through the system. Fertilizer prices surge by more than 50%, diesel for transport jumps dramatically, shipping routes are forced to reroute around danger zones, adding weeks to delivery times, and suddenly the system that once prided itself on efficiency, the so-called just-in-time supply chain, begins to show cracks. It was designed for speed, for precision, for minimizing waste, but not for resilience. Not for a world where conflict and climate collide at the same time. And now, that fragility is being exposed in real time. Think about something as simple as a loaf of bread. For decades, it has been the most basic symbol of stability, always there, always affordable, always taken for granted. But in April 2026, even bread is no longer guaranteed. Because bread is not just flour and water, it is the final product of a global network that starts with fertilizer, moves through farming, relies on fuel, and ends in distribution. When fertilizer prices skyrocket, when wheat becomes more expensive to grow, when transport costs double, that loaf of bread becomes something else entirely. It becomes a reflection of geopolitical instability. It becomes a luxury disguised as a necessity. And what's happening in supermarkets is a quiet warning. Shelves that once stayed full all day are now empty within minutes of opening. People are arriving earlier, queues are forming, not out of habit but out of fear that if they come too late, there will be nothing left. Retirees, families, individuals who have spent decades trusting the system are now standing in the cold, hoping to secure the basics. This is not panic yet, but it is something close to it, a shift in behavior that signals a deeper loss of confidence. But bread is just the beginning. Because once the backbone of a meal is affected, everything else starts to follow. The flavors that once defined modern living, olive oil, spices, dates, specialty imports, are slowly fading away. The Middle East, often seen only through the lens of conflict, is in reality a crucial supplier of both energy and essential agricultural inputs. When that region is disrupted, it doesn't just affect oil prices, it affects the entire ecosystem of food production and distribution. Olive oil, once casually poured over salads, is now being treated like liquid gold. Spices that added identity and culture to meals are becoming rare, their absence turning once vibrant dishes into something bland and unfamiliar. And with scarcity comes something darker. The emergence of black markets. Items that were once freely available are now being traded quietly, discreetly, in places you wouldn't expect. It sounds extreme, but history shows that whenever supply is constrained and demand remains, informal systems take over. It's not just about economics anymore, it's about behavior, about how people adapt when normal systems fail. Then comes protein, the cornerstone of any traditional diet. Meat, poultry, eggs, these are not luxuries in the conventional sense, they are essentials. But they are also among the most resource-intensive foods to produce. When feed costs rise, when energy becomes expensive, when farmers can no longer sustain operations, the entire system begins to buckle. Farmers are forced into impossible decisions, selling livestock early, cutting losses, shutting down operations that have existed for generations. For a brief moment, this creates the illusion of abundance, more meat on the shelves, lower prices temporarily, but it's a false signal. because once that supply is exhausted, there is nothing left behind it. And the consequences go beyond the shelves. Reports of increased theft, rising tensions in supermarkets, even violence, are beginning to surface. These are not isolated incidents, they are symptoms of a system under stress. When basic needs become uncertain, social stability is tested in ways that are often underestimated. You might think that at least vegetables would remain stable, something simple, something local, but even that assumption is being challenged. Tomatoes, cucumbers, peppers, all staples of a healthy diet, are now under threat from multiple angles. Domestic production is struggling under the weight of energy costs, greenhouses shutting down because heating them is no longer economically viable. At the same time, imports from key regions like Spain and Morocco are being hit by extreme weather, crop failures that reduce yields at the worst possible moment. It's a perfect storm, domestic limitations combined with international shortages. And when supply drops, retailers respond in the only way they can, by imposing limits. 3 items per customer. A small rule, but one that changes everything psychologically. Because it signals scarcity. It tells people that what they once assumed to be abundant is now controlled, restricted, uncertain. Even dairy, something as fundamental as milk, is no longer immune. The dairy industry has always operated on thin margins, and now those margins are disappearing entirely. Rising feed costs, energy expenses, packaging issues, all converging at once. Some producers are choosing to export rather than supply locally because it makes more financial sense, leaving domestic shelves empty by the end of the day. Cheese imports are declining, plant-based alternatives are rising but becoming expensive themselves, caught in the same web of cost increases. And then there are the symbols of modern lifestyle, items that were never essential but became part of everyday identity. Avocados, for example, once seen as trendy, now becoming rare. Their supply chains disrupted, their costs inflated beyond practicality. It's not about the avocado itself, it's about what it represents, a system that allowed global access to everything, all the time, now showing its limitations. Even outside of food, the crisis extends into daily essentials like cleaning products. Not because of what's inside them, but because of the packaging. Plastic, something so overlooked, so taken for granted, is now becoming a bottleneck. With raw materials stuck in disrupted trade routes and taxes increasing, production slows, prices rise, and availability drops. Suddenly, maintaining basic hygiene becomes more complicated than it should be. And if you think beverages are safe, consider orange juice. A morning routine for millions, now threatened by disease in orange crops, extreme weather, and logistical challenges. Supply is shrinking, prices are rising, and what was once a simple glass of juice is turning into something that requires consideration. All of these stories, bread, spices, meat, vegetables, dairy, packaging, juice, they might seem separate, but they are deeply connected. They all point to the same underlying issue, a system that was built for efficiency, not resilience. A system that assumes stability in a world that is anything but stable. So the real question is not whether prices will go up, that's already happening. The real question is how people will adapt. Will we return to local sourcing, seasonal eating, simpler diets? Will households begin to rethink their dependence on global supply chains? Will communities become more self-sufficient, or will reliance on fragile systems continue? Because at its core, this is not just an economic story. It's a societal one. It's about how modern life, built on convenience and abundance, responds when those assumptions are challenged. It's about whether the idea of endless availability was ever real, or just an illusion sustained by a delicate balance that is now shifting. And as you think about all of this, ask yourself something simple but powerful. If tomorrow the shelves near you were not just expensive, but empty, what would you do? What would your plan be? Because in times like these, preparation is not panic, it's awareness. And awareness is the first step toward resilience. If this perspective made you think differently, if it opened your eyes to something deeper than just headlines, then share your thoughts, because conversations like these matter more than ever. And if you want to stay ahead of what's coming next, make sure you stay connected, because this story is still unfolding, and what happens next might affect all of us more than we expect.